Hello again from me, it's Brian. This video is called Understanding Psychosocial Issues in the Life of the Visually Impaired Learner. And when I say that name, Understanding Psychosocial Issues, it sounds sort of rather technical, I thought. And yes, of course there are difficult issues to understand when we're trying to think about the psychosocial circumstances of the visually impaired child. But the key to these issues and the key message I want to communicate with this talk really is a very simple one. There's only really one point I make with this video. And that's that our challenge as teachers is to listen, feel, and think our way into the world of the visually impaired child. In my work, I often have conversations with teachers who describe feeling quite a lot of anxiety about having visually impaired learners in their classes. To them, visual impairment seems a little bit strange, foreign, a little bit scary, something they're not familiar with at all. They find it hard because of that to just be curious about the life of the child who they're with, to just ask simple questions as they would with any other child. But this is what is needed. A child who's understood feels safe. And a child who feels safe and feels heard is a child who is able to learn. It's true that for people of any age, adults or children, vision loss is often traumatic. And so we'll see signs of emotional distress in the children in our classes. And like any other child, these children need to talk to a safe and caring adult about what they're experiencing. This brings us to the issue of listening and our skills as listeners. Listening is not something which just comes naturally. It's a skill which we need to grow and develop in ourselves. It must be grown over time with deliberate intent. Often when we're around traumatic feelings, particularly perhaps those associated with experiences we haven't had ourselves, when we're around those sorts of feelings, we feel helpless. And when we feel helpless about the distress of someone else, we often need to sort of step in and fix it. In that fixing role, which some of us as teachers know all too well, sometimes all we can do is miss the experience that's being described to us, forget to actually just listen to the human that we are with. Trusting and honest relationships of all sorts are built on good listening. Not on forced solutions, not on sorting things out, but actually on making real contact with the person, with the child we are with. I find it useful in this discussion to think about the difference between empathy and pity. Empathy surrounds the question of what it's like for you as another human being, finding out what it's like, what things are like, what life is like for somebody else. It's a caring, respectful, and quite simple attitude to take where we open our ears and open our hearts to what things are like for someone else. A question I often ask children who seem to be in some sort of emotional distress, an initial question, is the following. I'd say, just tell me about one difficult thing that you experience in your day. And when I hear about that thing, I can then begin to try and understand it, explore it, and show care about that experience that the child is having. This is not special care for special children or something strange like that. That kind of care to me is more like pity. Instead, it's just simple care, curiosity, and understanding which we would show for any child. In the worlds of learners with visual impairment, there are often painful and immense transitions that they experience. As an example of how to listen to the experience of visually impaired learners in our classrooms, I often talk about the following example. When we listen, we are not just listening to the words that a learner is telling us, we're also noticing how he or she behaves and making sense of what is being shown to us about the world of this learner. I very often have the experience of discussions with teachers in which I'll be told a particular sort of a story about a learner with visual impairment. And it goes like this. A child is either new at the school, it might be a special school, or has been there for some time, but has recently experienced a sudden loss of vision, so a precipitous worsening of a visual impairment. So let's say this is a boy of 11 years old, who's experienced a precipitous loss of vision recently. And so whereas this boy previously used low vision accessible learning and teaching and support materials such as large print, things have changed in terms of his experience in the classroom now, and because his sight has deteriorated, he now needs to begin to learn Braille and orientation and mobility. Now, what happens then in the story is that the teacher describes how she or he becomes very frustrated because the boy doesn't seem to want to learn these new things, to learn Braille and orientation and mobility. And there's a kind of confusion where the teacher says, well, why doesn't the boy want to do these things? Why doesn't this young learner want to learn Braille and orientation and mobility? Because, of course, it'll be so helpful and useful to him in his new situation of being more severely visually impaired. Now, if we stop and think about this and try and get into the world of that learner and what has happened to him recently, what we realize is that this is a child who's going through enormous changes in how he experiences the world. And they're not changes which are not just to do with the simple instrumental question of whether he uses large print or uses Braille. Instead, they are to do with a very sense of his identity, how he sees himself, how he feels other people see him, and how he experiences the world. Becoming visually impaired, or having the experience of one's vision deteriorating if one already has a visual impairment, brings very real changes to one's everyday life. It's also going to bring losses in terms of what one is able to participate in. And these are the sorts of things we need to imagine and understand in the life of what this little boy is going through. If we understand those things, then we see the child's unwillingness to learn Braille or orientation and mobility not as as bad behavior or disobedience, but simply as a completely understandable part of the process of adjustment to his or her new world. We need to open our ears to understanding that experience in a sensitive and supportive way. The more we do that, the more we listen, the more we observe, and the more we think our way into the world of the visually impaired learner, the more we find that what our children say and do makes sense, and we can connect with them in a real way around their experience of the world. And as I said earlier, the child who feels heard, who feels understood, is a child we feel in real contact with and a child who feels ready to learn. On a more practical level, it's our responsibility as teachers to build networks of support across parental communities, across teacher communities, and amongst children. We can build networks of support among teachers across schools as well. And we have, lucky for us, in the 21st century, social media, which makes all of this very easy and very possible. Of course, it's true that some children will need professional psychological care at schools, children who are experiencing extreme levels of distress. But I would argue that as teachers, it's our responsibility and it's a first priority for us to do all we can to create a caring, listening, and supportive environment for all children. So let's go ahead and try and do that.